Is this really better than Chanel? Is this really better than Tom Ford? Is this better than YSL? Because this is very expensive. What's up, friends? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing well. This video is going to be my review of the Cle de Peau eye color quads. I have 3 of the shades to show you guys today. I'm going to be doing a deep dive not only on the formula, but also how it compares to other luxury formulas out there. You guys are going to see swatches. We're doing looks with every single palette. So if you want to hear all of my honest thoughts, and if I think these are worth the very high price tag, then keep watching. And if you are new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Sophia and I am a complete luxury beauty addict. I upload videos every single week on brands like Cle de Peau, Chanel, Dior, Tom Ford, just to name a few. So if that is your jam, hit that subscribe button to join our fam because we have a lot of fun over here on my channel. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you like it. And as always, I always link where you can buy the products and anything that is on my face today in the description box down below. I do use affiliate links, so shopping through my links supports my channel. And without further ado, let's get into the review of these eyeshadow palettes. All right, party people, these are the Cle de Peau eye color quads, the infamous $110 USD eyeshadow quads. And so the question is, are these really better than any other luxury formula that are out there? Are these better than anything that you can maybe find at Sephora? So I'm gonna help you demystify these and figure out if they are worth it for you. A lot of times this is the part of the video where people skip ahead to see the swatches or maybe see the final looks, etc. I really don't think that you should do that, friends, because what makes these special is not the swatches. It's not the way that they swatch onto the hand. It's actually the formula and the texture of the shadows that makes them super unique. So let me explain. On the Cle de Peau website, these are described as a luxuriously pigmented eyeshadow quad featuring a skincare infused primer and 3 finely milled shades for a smooth, long-lasting finish with skincare benefits. Some of the claims are that they prime eyes for smoothness and moisture that lasts 8 hours, delivers fresh, long-lasting color and texture for up to 12 hours. So this is yet another makeup product that they're trying to sell us on the fact that there are skincare benefits, which some of us kind of roll our eyes at that, but you know what? If it comes to my eyelids, which are super duper dry, by the way, very dry skin, I don't mind having an eyeshadow that has some moisturizing properties to it. These are not going to cure all your wrinkles and lift any sagginess or anything like that. But when I took a look at the ingredients, I am seeing argan oil, I am seeing vitamin E, and I'm seeing a lot of other moisturizers. I do also want to call out that these do have fragrance. They do not have talc. They have a 24-month shelf life and they were made in Japan. And because there's so many moisturizing ingredients in this formula, it's definitely very apparent upon first just touching and swatching and playing around with the shadows that it is a very creamy formula. It feels super silky and luxurious to the touch. It's not so creamy where you could say that this is like a cream shadow palette, not at all. It's very much a powder shadow, but this is probably like the creamiest, most moisturizing feeling eyeshadows that I have in my luxury collection. Another thing that I noticed when I first started playing around with these is that the bottom left shade in every single palette felt creamier and more emollient than the other shades. When I took a look on the Cle de Peau website, I realized that this shade is supposed to be a primer shade that you apply first before putting on the other shades. I really think that they need to put that on the box, guys, because I couldn't tell. And like, I reviewed this stuff, okay? And I could not tell. So Cle de Peau, that's just a little bit of feedback for you. It wasn't apparent to me by any of the packaging or whatever that this was supposed to be a primer shade. That being said, I did my research and it looks like the way that Cle de Peau recommends applying these shadows is first putting on the primer shade, then using one of the medium tone shades all over the lid, or you can combine them, create whatever kind of effect you want. Then use the deep shade and kind of use that as like a liner, just adding little touches of shading, maybe a little bit in the crease. And then finally, you can go back into the primer shade and you can use that to brighten up the inner corner, to put that on the center of the lid. So you guys are gonna see me do this in the demo. And I'm also gonna show you how the primer makes a difference and how I actually like to apply these using the little applicators that come with the eyeshadows, because I don't usually use those. You guys know I'm like a little bit of a brush snob, but I think that this application process, it actually works really, really well. The last thing that I want to talk about before we get into the swatches and the demos is just the packaging. These are actually refillable. So when you buy these on the Cle de Peau website or wherever else you are purchasing them from in the future, you actually buy the shadows. They come as like a little cartridge in a separate box, and then you have to buy the actual component. So you can, I guess, swap them out, you can refill it, which is kind of nice, but you do have to pay for both. And that's why it's $110. It's $110 for both the eyeshadows and the component. In terms of how the component actually feels, it's not anything to write home about, but like, it's nice. It looks really nice. I know it's covered in my fingerprints right now, but I think it looks luxe. For comparison, I have a Tom Ford quad right here. I don't know. I like the look and feel of the Cle de Peau one a little bit more, but the materials you can hear, they're both pretty plasticky. So those are all the main product details. I just want to kind of set the stage for you guys. Now I'm going to go through all three of the color stories that I picked up. I have one neutral shade, one warm shade, and one cool shade to show you guys. So we have a good little mixture. We're going to do the swatches, the looks. Let's dive in. The first color story that I have for you here, friends, is number 7, Starlight Splendor. This is considered in the warm category from Cle de Peau. I would say it's like neutral to warm. It's not super warm in my opinion. You guys will see from the swatches kind of what I was talking about before. These shadows actually have pretty decent pigment to them, but notice how the finish of the shadows is pretty soft. It's not a high shine foil. You're not getting any glitter from these shades at all. And when you take a look at the demo, this was actually before I knew about the whole primer shades situation. So I'll show you guys the look that I created with using a brush. Typically what I do is I just kind of go in with the medium tone shades on the lid, and then I go in with the darker shade in the crease, and then I was using the primer shade to kind of do some of that highlighting at the end. For this particular look, I used a little bit of the Victoria Beckham Satin Eye Casual in the shade Bronze. I can link that down below for you guys. And this is the final look that I created with Starlight Splendor. I think that it came out really beautiful. I will say though, surprisingly, some of you are gonna be shocked by this, I actually think that this colorway is probably my least favorite of the three. It could just be that I already have so many warm tone brown neutral palettes in my collection that this one just isn't really my favorite. I think one of the bigger reasons is that a lot of the shades are sort of medium in tone, and so I don't get as much contrast as I think I would like. If I'm using a palette like this, I think I want like at least one sparkle shade to add in at the end. But that being said, I still think that this color story is a really nice, good standard neutral option for people out there that love browns and maybe just a little bit of like a slightly pinky coral. Then, friends, I found out about the whole primer shade situation, and I was like, you know what? For science, I'm going to take off the makeup on one eye and I'm going to reapply it in the recommended way by Cle de Peau. So that's exactly what I did. I applied the primer shade. I used the little applicators to do the eye look. I thought it was really easy. I actually really like applying these shadows with the applicators because it is so creamy. They do a really good job of laying on the product. The shadows are very easy and effortless to blend. And so I want to show you guys just a side by side here of the primer shade versus the non-primer shade. And I think that with the primer, it definitely was a little bit easier to glide the already very creamy shadows onto my eye. It made it a little bit more effortless. I also think that when you use the applicators, not necessarily using the primer, but when you use the applicators, you get more intensity from the pigment. So these are all just some tips I have for you in order to maybe get the effect that you want. I later on did a wear test to see, you know, does the primer make any difference? I will say I had a day. I was outside kind of, you know, walking around. It was hot out. I went and lifted some weights. Like I really, really put these shadows to the test. And what I found is that I think normally, even if you don't use the primer, these shadows have pretty good longevity. Even though they are so creamy, I really don't see as much creasing as I do with, let's say, a Tom Ford Creme formula shadow. But I certainly see that the side that used the primer wore a lot better. I didn't get as much creasing. I really think that the primer makes a difference. I even asked my boyfriend to tell me which one. He said, okay, definitely that eye looks better because it doesn't have as creased of a look. So even he agreed with me. The journey continues, friends, with the next shade that I have here, which is called Seagrass. This one seems to be the most popular right now because this is the one that sold out first. These are permanent, guys. They're gonna come back in stock, so you don't have to rush to get these. You can consider which color you like the best, but it does seem like this one is the most popular, and it also is the one that you guys requested that I reviewed the most. This is considered in the neutral category. It is a mixture of soft greens. We have kind of like a mossy green. We have a shimmering khaki, so kind of like a cross between a gold and a green. The primer shade is a beautiful light champagne gold, and then the deeper shade has a little bit more of like a teal nature to it. It's kind of like a blue spruce forest type of green. It's a really beautiful palette, and this is also a really great way to do green in maybe a little bit of like a softer, more understated, elegant way. You guys will be seeing in the demo that I am applying this in the recommended way with putting the primer on first and then using the little applicators to create my look. Once again, I felt like this palette performed just as well as the Starlight Splendor one. And I think this is when I realized that if I want to get the most pigment, using like a dense brush or these little spongy applicators is actually a really great way to do that. I applied some liquid eyeliner, and this is the final look with Seagrass. I think this is really pretty. It's not my favorite one. My favorite one is actually the one that I'm wearing on my eyes today, but I think a lot of you guys are really going to like this green palette from Cle de Peau. And I want to also comment on the wear test that I did with this one as well. I'll show you guys a side by side here, just after kind of like a general work from home day. So like nothing too crazy. I really don't think that these crease that bad, but once again, I can admit that the primer side looks better. Then I did a little ride on my Peloton, and you can tell even more, friends, like just how much more that little primer shade helps the shadows to adhere to the eye. It creases the longevity. So I think that's great. You kind of get a little bit of like that moisturization. It makes them easier to apply, and you know, the proof is in the pudding. It helps the shadows last. And then the last and my favorite colorway, which is in the cool family of shadows from Cle de Peau, is Sundried Driftwood. I don't know about you guys, but this is the prettiest sun-dried driftwood that I've ever seen. It's kind of like a weird name, but I'm here for it. I like this one. I know it's not a crazy unique color story, but I really like this one, probably because there is a lot of contrast between the deepest shades and the lighter shades that are in the palette. It gives a really beautiful sheen and sort of gossamer-like look to the lid. For whatever reason, this color story, I think it is very much complemented by the textures of the shadows. Something just really soft and feminine, but then you still have that beautiful plummy purple shade to create some contrast, smoke it out if you want. I added a little bit of my favorite Chanel eyeliner, which is in the shade Cassis. I will link that down below. Put on a lot of mascara, and this is the final look using Sundried Driftwood. Oh, it's just such a beautiful palette. Comment down below and let me know which of these was your favorite. Also, if you picked up any of these shades, how do you think it looked like on your skin tone? I felt like all of them were very consistent in terms of quality. None of them had any glittery shades. None of them really had any like high shine metallics. The textures were pretty consistent no matter on what color story you pick. All right, friends, are you still with me? Are you ready to hear my final thoughts? Because of course I have many. I do think there is a group of customers who are really, really going to like these palettes. And then I think there are some other people who are not going to like these palettes at all. So let me break it down for you. I do think that these eyeshadows make total sense for the Cle de Peau brand and the Cle de Peau customer. Between the formula, the packaging, the colors that they launched, it makes total sense. Cle de Peau does cater to a little bit more of like a more mature woman, and also very much to the Asian market. And those consumer groups, they like shadows that are a little bit softer, that don't highlight any texture on their eyelids, that come in very classic, elegant colors. That's typically what we see from these types of brands. And you see that from the rest of the Cle de Peau product lineup. So I feel for the customer that they are catering to. They have delivered. Like, this makes total sense. I do think that they're overpriced. $110, it's like, excuse me, that is pretty expensive. When you look at their products, they do tend to try and price them more than Chanel and Tom Ford. And I think that is what is happening here. They're telling you these are skincare infused and they're gonna be so much better, and they are kind of like a step above those other luxury brands. And it's up to you to decide if the $110 is gonna be worth it to you. I think the formula is divine. It's not gonna like turn back the sands of time, right? It's argan oil and vitamin E. You can get an eye cream maybe from Cle de Peau that has those ingredients. But I think for that target customer, it is going to be worth it, especially for someone that doesn't have a lot of eyeshadows and they just want something that works really well and it looks beautiful and smooth and elegant. This is for the customer that cares a lot about the finish and texture of the shadows on their eyelids. Having their eyelids look hydrated, having them not look dry, not highlighting any type of texture, that's who these are for. These aren't not pigmented. I want to emphasize that. They're not as sheer as a lot of other luxury formulas that are out there. I actually think that you can get decent pigmentation with these. Like, I'm very happy with the pigmentation that I got with the palette that I'm wearing today and the other palettes. It's just that given the color stories and the texture, you're not gonna get like a sparkly, pop of shimmer. You're not gonna get that in these palettes. You're not gonna get a high shine foil shimmer. I'll show you some examples in just a moment. You're gonna get shadows that are extremely user-friendly in colorways that are absolutely foolproof. All the colors blend together really well. They all work together very well. You don't need to be like an expert in color theory and makeup artistry to use these palettes. I can see, a woman walking around in a department store, picking one of these up, putting them on her eyes, not reading the directions, not really like knowing much about how to do her makeup, using the little applicators and it looking super cute on her. Like, I can hand this over to my mom and I can see her really, really enjoying these. In fact, I kind of want to buy one for her to see what she thinks of them. So that's the reality, friends. They're super user-friendly. They're catering to that type of customer. And if you don't fit within that particular area of makeup preferences, then these might not be for you. If you want to know my personal opinion, like my preferences, I think that they're really beautiful. I really like them, but given that they are so expensive, I don't think I necessarily need to have more than the 3 that I picked up. I will probably use these in conjunction with like some other topper shades that I have, because I do like a little bit more sparkle from the looks that I'm creating. I can very much appreciate these, but these aren't particularly like fun for me to use. These aren't like fun palettes that create fun looks that I'm gonna like be dying to play around with. This is like, oh, I want to look super elegant and I want something that's user-friendly that just works. Maybe I travel with this, or I'm getting ready for work and I need something that is very neutral and quick to use. That's when I'm going to be using these. So that's how I think about these palettes within the scope of my luxury collection. What I want to do now, as promised multiple times in this video, is just give you guys a little comparison about how I think you should think about these compared to other luxury palettes. The biggest comparison request that I got was to compare these up against the new YSL Mini Couture Clutch palettes. I've been reviewing these babies like crazy. You guys know I love them. They're really, really good. I think that they are kind of similar in the sense that they also have a creamy feel, but I don't think that they are as creamy and silky as these ones from Cle de Peau. They are a little bit more pigmented, but they're also a little bit messier because you get more kick up in the pan. So if you're someone that you just can't deal with that, you don't want any fallout, then the Cle de Peau are really good to, you know, kind of satisfy that preference. The other thing that I want to mention about these, well, other than the fact that like the packaging pretty much trumps all the palettes that I'm going to be talking about today because it is so cute, is the fact that these palettes, they have these really beautiful sparkly shades, and that's something I really like. And so that's why, you know, if you ask me what's better, the YSL or the Cle de Peau, I really can't answer that. It depends on what you prefer. For me, I prefer the YSL because I love that sparkle. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is the Starlight Splendor, and then this is the Spontini Lilies palette that I have right here from YSL. They're both very soft and they're both very smooth, but the Cle de Peau, they swatch a little bit better because they have more like emollients and moisturizers. So just kind of keep that in mind. They look more pigmented, but I actually think that you can build up the YSL a little bit more. And then you can see the sparkle shade from YSL. I have a couple more swatches here. This is from the Babylon Roses palette. These are even more sparkly than the one in Spontini Lilies. A lot of my subscribers told me they're like, that's just too much glitter. I don't really want to deal with the fallout, or they don't like the way that it looks on their eyelids. And if you're that kind of person that doesn't like that glittery shine, then you're probably going to like the Cle de Peau palettes a little bit more. But that's kind of the differences between these. I personally prefer these just a little bit more because I like the packaging, because I think the formula is a little bit more fun to play around with, and I love that sparkle. Next up, I have the Creme formula from Tom Ford. Right here, I have the limited edition Forbidden Pink palette. You might still be able to get this. I can try finding it and linking it down below. This formula also has a lot of similarities to the Cle de Peau. Still, I think the Cle de Peau feels silkier and like a little bit creamier to the touch. I think where the Cle de Peau really wins out here is in the longevity, especially if you use the primer. I feel like this is a lot more crease proof than the Tom Ford Creme shadows. I feel like these don't have these kind of have the worst longevity for me, at least out of all of the Tom Ford palettes. I still really like the formula. I use these because I like that soft, velvety, smoky type of look that they give the eyes. It's very similar to the Cle de Peau, but I don't think that the longevity is there as much. What you do get from these is you're more likely to get those kind of sparkly shades. Here, I'll show you guys a comparison right here. I have, let me see if I can remember, because these are actually pretty similar. I've got Tom Ford Forbidden Pink, and then we have the Starlight Splendor right here. See how Tom Ford, it's like the mattes are mattes and the shimmers are shimmers. With the Cle de Peau, these textures, they blend together a little bit more. I just feel like overall, I have to be honest with you, I think that the Cle de Peau formula is a little bit more user-friendly. Sometimes these, just like depending on the brushes that I use, they can get a little bit patchy. I feel like they're not as user-friendly. Even though I still like the formula, I don't think it is as user-friendly. While I have Starlight Splendor still on my hand, I thought I would show you guys Charlotte Tilbury Queen of Glow. The Charlotte Tilbury shadows are just so much more foiled than the Cle de Peau. I really like that. Like, I can appreciate all types of textures. It really just depends on the look. But if you love that high shine, then the Charlotte Tilbury formula is honestly excellent. I do think that they have a creamy touch to them. It's not going to be as silky as the Cle de Peau, but you get more pigmentation and more shine. Next up, friends, we have Chanel, and I thought it would be fun to compare the Sundried Driftwood with Tissé Rivoli, which I know is a very popular colorway from Chanel. I think in general, the Chanel customer and the Cle de Peau customer do tend to have a lot of overlap. I think if you enjoy Chanel shadows, you're really going to enjoy the Cle de Peau as well. Let me show you the side by side right here. So I've got the Chanel right here and the Cle de Peau right there. Look how similar, they're actually more similar than I thought they were going to be when I first swatched them. The biggest difference is, you know, do you want a more moisturizing formula? Then go with the Cle de Peau. But I think that in terms of like the amount of pigmentation that you get and like the texture, it's pretty similar. I will say that with Chanel, I feel like the pigmentation, it's kind of hit or miss. It's not as consistent. I think that with the Cle de Peau, you get more consistent pigmentation. Like I think that the pigmentation is there, but with certain Chanel quads, it's like, I just feel like I'm putting on the shadow, and I just don't get as much as I want. So I'll mention that as well. I think that these are more consistent. If you're looking for something that has just a little bit more glimmer to it, I also think that the Chanel is better because these have a much smoother look. Hopefully you guys can tell that little glimmer in the light on camera. Next up, we have Dior. Right here, I have the shade Tutu. This is in the original formula. They were reformulated, but I'll still explain the differences between them. And I thought that this would be good to compare up against the Sundried Driftwood quad. I'll show you the swatches here. This is the Dior, and then this is the Cle de Peau. I think in general with Dior, it is a drier formula, and it is a little bit drier given the reformulation. I think that the Dior formula is better if you have a lot of issues with creasing on your eyelids. If you have oilier eyelids, I think that the Dior one is going to be better, just given that the new formula has a lot of cornstarch, so it's kind of better at absorbing and kind of sticking to the eyelid. Also with Dior, you're gonna get more like true mattes and true shimmers, just like I was saying with the Tom Ford. It's not as much as this like creamy soft sheen. And although Dior shadows, you do get a lot of satins, and they can be, you know, on the softer side. I think that you have a little bit more room with a lot of their eyeshadow quints to play around with different types of looks, whereas with the Cle de Peau, I feel like a lot of times you're gonna get like the same one or two looks. I also have here one of the Viseart palettes. This is one of their little petite fours in the shade Lila Doe, and I thought this would be good to compare with the Sundried Driftwood. I love Viseart shadows, but the feedback that I get from some of my subscribers who like those softer shades is that these are a little bit too pigmented for them, and that the shimmers are maybe a little bit too foily. Like, see how those stand out? And the Viseart mattes, like, they are mattes. You can blend them out, you can build them up. Like, this is a makeup artist brand, so it definitely, at least the formula, maybe not necessarily this little palette, but the formula was designed more so for makeup artist purposes. If you're looking for just like some more affordable, you know, $25, but also like makeup artist quality eyeshadow palettes in very wearable colors, take a look at the Viseart ones, because they are some of my favorites, but for certain, they are a very, very different formula. When I was looking at these quads, I kind of thought Viseart, because they do so many of these little wearable quad palettes, but the formula is not the same. It's not the same. Almost done, friends. Next up, I have the Suqqu formula. This was one of their limited edition palettes. Unfortunately, you can't get it anymore, but that's okay. We can talk about the differences between the formulas. I still think the Cle de Peau, they are way creamier than these ones from Suqqu. These have like a little bit of creaminess, but they're not like the YSL palettes, for example. These are also very user-friendly, but I think the biggest differences between Suqqu palettes and these Cle de Peau quads is that these color stories are usually a lot more inventive and different. They're not going to be the typical classic like cool tone browns. No, friends, like, you get these really cool, like, multi-dimensional shimmers. The colors are just a little bit more interesting. So the formulas, they're both very user-friendly, but I think that the style of makeup, the approach to color is very different. And then lastly, friends, I was asked to compare Surratt shadows as well. This is the only Surratt palette that I have, believe it or not. It is the Beyond Beige palette. So take this with a grain of salt. I only have one palette, but I thought it would be fun to compare this up against the Starlight Splendor. And you know what? They don't look like it in the pan, but I feel like there are some similarities here. Here's Surratt Beyond Beige, and then here's Starlight Splendor. It's a little bit warmer, a little bit more corally. I actually think the Surratt, it's not that far off from the Cle de Peau. Cle de Peau is still creamier. See how they kind of have that sheen from the moisturizers in that formula? And then Surratt, you still get that really smooth, just kind of soft effect from the eyeshadow. Very, very silky, but not as creamy, not as moisturizing. But I think that if you are interested in the Cle de Peau ones, you know, like the Surratt ones are not that far off. I think you can definitely get the same aesthetic. All right, friends, was that enough? Because That's all I got. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for sticking around with me and watching today. If you like this video, please don't forget to give me a big thumbs up. I really hope that it was helpful. And now it is your turn to sound off in those comments down below and let me know all of your thoughts. Let's please be respectful, because I know a lot of people, they were saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that these are $110, but there are people out there that have purchased these and are really, really liking them. So please share your thoughts respectfully in the comment section down below. We would love to hear what you think. Subscribe if you haven't already. And with that, friends, I hope that you see some beauty in your day, and I will see you in my next one. Goodbye.